You're listening to RideAlong, EMT School. I'm Mike.
And I'm Max. We're two students navigating EMT school, bringing you along week by week.
And I'm Jonathan, a paramedic bringing real-world perspective.
Join us as we share the lessons, challenges, and stories from EMT school, and hear insights from those already living the EMS life. Welcome to the RideAlong. All right, well, welcome everybody to the RideAlong EMT School podcast. I am, of course, Mike, one of your loyal co-hosts of the podcast. And today is a very special episode. Today is a bonus episode. And you know what we like to do on our bonus episodes, and that's really introduce somebody from the EMS space that is, well, quite frankly, awesome. We love doing that. We love introducing you to these people that we have met in our journey along EMT school. So today I have the pleasure of introducing you all to a retired provider that not only has a huge breadth of knowledge as a paramedic, but someone who has leveraged that experience into a whole second career teaching fellow providers and customers all around the country about the proper use of some of the most iconic tools within EMS. Bob Waddell is the training manager for SAM Medical, a name so synonymous with musculoskeletal trauma that it feels incomplete to say the word Splint without first saying SAM. Over the last few months, Bob has become a trusted source of medical expertise, a mentor to this podcast, and someone that I am happy to call a friend. When I first met him, Bob coined himself a fossil medic, but what we here at the RideAlong podcast have found him to be much more of a hidden fountain of EMS knowledge than anything akin to an old fossil gathering dust. So welcome, Bob. It's great to have you here on the podcast.
Great. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. And let me just clarify one thing, because it's, as we go on, you know, one of the things we're going to talk about is like yourself, new people into the industry. Mm-hmm. What can you do with it and stuff? And so I retired from the street work.
Yes.
But I'm still very, very active in EMS and pre-hospital medicine, emergency medicine. And I think that's a key thing for people to know, whether they're, you know, like you, who have recently finished your initial EMT course, getting your toes wet, and pretty soon you'll be up, you know, well above your ankles and your knees into the processes and the industry. So anyway, but yeah, I appreciate it. And yeah, great to be with you. Great to call you a friend and get to know you. So yeah.
Well, thank you, sir. It's been, I mean, you've been such a huge resource for us, and SAM Medical as well, in terms of, you know, offering basically a sideline education to us in some of your products in the proper use, and helping us get information out about amazing tools and the things that we use every day, so that we can know exactly from, for a lack of a better phrase, the horse's mouth of, you know, how we should use some of these iconic tools, like a SAM Splint, or, right, you know, Kaido SAM, or, you know, the SAM XT tourniquet. And it's been absolutely invaluable, because while there are standards and practices within EMS, and like people, you know, like splints, for example, where it's kind of like ubiquitous to that phase of training where it's like, hey, we do splinting. And this is how our school taught splinting, or this is how, everyone here has done a splint this way. There are some nuances sometimes that exist between the common use, which may not be optimal, and it may not be what's exactly prescribed or recommended by the manufacturer, where it's like, you can optimize this and make it even better. So
right,
your guidance has really, you know, opened that door and like opened our eyes to go, hey, you know what? It doesn't always have to be what somebody tells you in the training. You can kind of go out there and find what the optimal use is for something.
Right. Right. And that's the one thing I tell people, specific with the SAM splints, is that your creativity is the limiting factor on how you are caring for your patient with that splint. You can stick with the simple foundation processes, like you mentioned, that are on the splint, that are in the instructions, or sometimes to just take that patient care up a couple notches. You have to be a little bit more creative to match the splint and their wound and their comfort and their care. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the beauties of the SAM Splint is it's you taking care of your patient.
Yeah. So actually, that's like where I would love to start, because you've been such a great training resource for us. And yes, to your point, it's hard to describe what your background and title is in a finite kind of description, because it's like, oh, this huge breadth of knowledge from the street and retired from the street, but you're not retired by any means. You've leveraged that. You've turned that into a career of teaching and training a bunch of different people across the United States. But would you mind kind of just telling us what your role is at SAM Medical and about the company?
Yeah. So, SAM Medical is roughly 48 years old in that age. The company is pushing 50 years. The SAM Splint was our hallmark product for many years. That one. And there's, I believe it's 11 different sizes and lengths and shapes of the splint. So it's not just a splint, although like that one you just showed, that actually is version 1 or Gen 1. Dr. Sam Scheinberg and his wife Sherry started the company. Sam was a trauma surgeon in Vietnam, highly decorated trauma surgeon in Vietnam, came back, became an orthopedic surgeon. The very quick story is he literally was laying on his couch one night playing with the foil of a juicy fruit gum wrapper and invented the SAM Splint from that. And yeah, I mean, it's when you go down, and I don't like the term down a rabbit hole, because I think it's more like up the beanstalk, but there's a lot to it. It wasn't, okay, he's on his couch and, by Monday they had the SAM Splint. There was a lot of time and energy and money and thought processes and voice of the customer put into that. But it's been the premier malleable splint on the market since the mid to late 80s. And, obviously, like everything else, especially in America, the patents have run out and there's many, many knockoffs, and if it's not orange and blue, which we have the trademark and copyrights to those colors, and then we do make a gray one that, kind of the military version. But the orange and blue SAM Splint is the real thing. And yet if you buy it on one of these cheap sites or, man, I got this screaming deal, and you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it came about. Now we have other products and, corporate America, we've been acquired by a company that's really helping us almost take a quantum leap, not just expand. My role at SAM is very fluid in my mind, in that I train our sales team on the application of our devices, but then also our staff. And there's roughly 75 people that work at SAM up in Oregon. But then we also have a very strong commitment to our partners / distributors, because we as SAM Medical sells through a distribution network versus direct sales. And so we've got some just outstanding partners, and, their sales representatives, distributor representatives, some of them have no medical knowledge. They're there to sell, and it's great people. But if they get that question, how do I do this? Or somebody asks XYZ, what does that mean? That's a lot of what I do. I train them. I answer those questions. I'm a technical advisor or subject matter expert, if you will, with them. And then the general public. There's the people out there like yourself that say, hey, we'd like to find out from the horse's mouth. We'd like to find out from the source, because, even though I'm very honored and privileged to be on the podcast, as you know, you have a lot of competitors in the social media world that their heart and mind might be in the right place, but their message is off, and some of it is horribly off, and we're that rabbit hole I'm definitely not going down, because it's the beanstalk of here's the ones that are positive. Even if they give out misinformation, it made the honest try, So we reach out, or they reach to us. I do that training. And then I'm involved, or trying to be involved, in a lot of the research. We research our products while they're in development, like our pelvic sling is pelvic sling is the official name. As far as I know, doing a lot of research, it's the only pelvic stabilization device that actually had evidence-based research in its development. So we're you come out with something, and there's a lot of research out there. We've got especially paramedic students at academic centers, community college or university. Many of them have to do some type of a thesis as part of their graduation package. And so, when they reach out to us, or I reach out to the instructors, the schools and stuff, and say, hey, look, would somebody like to do, and just a week ago when you and I were talking, I had somebody say, do you think I could do something on the SAM Splint? It's been out there for so long that everybody knows it. And it's like, that'd be great to do it, because, oh, by the way, some of us old folks have got complacent on how to use it properly. We got new folks taking the training all the time. And so it's very dynamic. It's not a stagnant product or a stagnant thought process. So I try to do that. And then also I try to spend some time looking at research, because there is a lot of research out there that, one, and this is not derogatory, but if you don't know how to read research, you read it and it looks like, wow, that's amazing. Their conclusion. And yet you start looking at that and it's like, no, they were actually proving a concept. We're going to make this product valuable to the end user, versus proof of concept, and which is like, let's put it out there. Let's put it out against the standard and have a fair, unbiased evaluation of it. And, it's like I tell people with all of our products, I'm not going to beat you over the head telling you the Splint or, any of our other devices are the best on the market. I'm going to let you figure that out and have that aha moment. Wow, this really does work. So I spend a lot of time, and it's not just in a classroom or on a webinar, a podcast, doing, here's how you bend the Splint, do this, do that. It's, I want people to think critically. And so trying to stimulate that. And I also ask that they stimulate my critical thinking, so the education, the training is a two-way street. Because again, with yourself, you're a new EMT, but you have knowledge to share that I need to listen to and learn. It's not just the one-way street of, I've been doing this for many decades, Mike, sit down, shut up, and become a mini me. That's the most dangerous thing on the planet, is somebody to imitate Bob too much.
I think I'd be pretty well served by it, at least in most aspects. But no, it's totally like the education process is not just one way. Like you mentioned, like you have to have a conversation. Now, as a good student, I should be listening like 90% and absorbing, but also critically thinking in there too, because part of my job as a student, and this goes beyond EMS training too, is like, okay, I'm taking what I can from Bob, and I'm processing it and I'm internalizing it. And then I'm listening to something from somebody else, a different source that may have conflict. Okay. Well, me as a student, how do I rectify that in my own head?
Right.
Do I just accept conflict and understand that there's different ways of doing it? Do I investigate it further? Do I go talk to Bob and say, hey, Bob, I heard this. What do you think about it? And then we have a conversation about that particular topic and, resolve it. At least as a student, for me to go, how do I move forward from this thing where I'm seeing conflicting information? And that happened to me a bunch of times because medicine is not, it's not math. It's not always like these universal constants where it's like A plus B equals C, right? There are many things that we do in here that change over time. And that's the nature of the art, of the science of medicine.
Yeah. And, and that's it. And I think that's a good example is often we use math as, it's the practice of medicine.
Yeah.
Well, medicine's several thousand, maybe many thousands of years old, and we're still practicing. We're still trying to figure it out, which means we're just trying to figure out humans. But, excuse me. But it also, up until somewhat recently, math it's like, 2 + 2 always is. And now they've gotten some weird, physics.
Oh yeah, we forget all the weird maths.
Yeah, string theory, but the foundational math hasn't changed since the ancient Greeks and stuff.
Yeah.
And it is, and that's where I think people now. I was very fortunate in my career. I worked for a service, and I don't know if I'm supposed to mention them or not. But you can cut it if . But when I first started, was an EMT, then a paramedic. In northern Colorado, and I worked for a company that ultimately was Thompson Valley Ambulance or Thompson Valley EMS, which is still there. And I still, and many people still regard it as one of the highest functioning, highest quality services in the country. Mm-hmm. They don't, pound their chest, anything like that. But we were the first service in the country to have full open protocols. So we could do anything we wanted to, but we had to be able to justify it, which is pretty easy. I know you from the marketing sales. Well, it's just how good of a sales pitch am I doing to the doc of, I want to do this, this, and this.
How can you back it up?
But then we had to validate it.
Right.
Well, validation of doing something that's on the edge of your scope of practice or outside your scope of practice by what the bureaucracy says, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you go to the other extreme. There's at least one state, there's actually multiples, that their statewide protocols, there is one way to do most everything.
Yep, that's mine.
Yeah, and that's good and solid. It makes it easy in one respect, but it's, go to Walmart, go to a football game, a baseball game, the city park. Every person you see there is different. And when they get sick or injured, it's different.
Yeah.
So how can one way work?
Yeah.
And so we adjust. That's one of the big hallmarks of EMS is we accept a challenge, we adjust, and we take care of the patient. So, you've got those two extremes, and somewhere in there's a lot of critical thinking, even if you're in a very open system or a very rigid system.
Yeah.
So I want people to think about the patient.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, where you started and how foundational that was for you in kind of how you thought about this stuff. If you wouldn't mind, I would be super curious to know, what got you into this? How did you start what was the thing that motivated you to become EMT and then drive to paramedic?
Yeah. Like many providers, EMT - whatever, paramedic - whatever, especially my generation, some a bit younger, we were going to be physicians and just didn't make it. Okay. Now
I think that's very true nowadays too.
Yeah, it's still true. My son is a physician, and I look at his laser focus to get to where he's at. I chased a lot of little shiny things, and I was good at it, but it was, So, from the time I was little, I wanted to be a physician. and was working in southeastern Wyoming, where I grew up, and they had a Boy Scout Explorer post, a medical Explorer post, and got into that. And, we started doing the little things that you do as junior high school students. And part of it, people say only in Wyoming, but I think it happens other places too. There was a situation not far from us where the local volunteer ambulance service, staffing wise, got into some big issues, terminal issues. And their medical director came to our group. He is also the medical director for the Explorer Post. He worked with us. He worked with the state EMS office and said, hey, look, these guys are going through the EMT class. You just can't call it EMT because they're underage. And the state gave authorization, and they set some standards higher than what an 18-year-old would have to go through. And basically there were 6 of us that got our EMTs before we turned 18.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I happened to be the youngest of the group by just a couple months, which my best friend still, that's an irritant to him. That so I was certified as a Wyoming EMT at 15. We practiced with this volunteer ambulance service up in the mountains, and and then it just progressed. Worked for the ambulance service in our community. Our medical director said, Bob, you got to get out of town. You were raised here. So, now as a high school graduate, college student, half the time you're working, half the time you're partying, and you will not get into medical school on this plan. And so then I went to move down to northern Colorado and got a job, and then became a paramedic, and from there I worked at obviously the local levels, but I've been a state bureaucrat, and then moved up to the federal level, worked internationally, did projects on 4 different continents, all related to pre-hospital EMS, emergency medicine, some of it clinical, some of it educational, some of it bureaucratic. But it's a field that has a lot of variables. You're not stuck in that. You must be on the ambulance. You must be picking up patients in stretchers until your knees or back or both blow out, or your head. It's just so full of the contamination, if you will. Like last evening, we had a neighbor came over, and, she is at the 39th week of pregnancy. And we started talking, and I said, like, home deliveries. In all my years, several decades, I've never seen a good home delivery. So I have a significant bias, because they don't call us. Hey, everything's going great. The midwife,
exactly,
or, whoever, mom, baby, and midwife are doing exactly what everything was designed to do. They don't.
Yeah, we
call
just
us.
want an EMT here to make sure things go smoothly. Like, that's not how it works.
I made too big of a pot of tea, and I have too many crumpets. Yeah. We don't get that,
No.
So, so we are tainted, and the mental health is a huge issue. It's highlighted, which is a good thing, currently. But a lot of people just get burned out because they don't realize you are seeing the worst of what happens to society.
Right.
Some of it is you are seeing the worst of society.
Yeah.
And unless you can vent that, release it, there's plenty of very, very good EMS providers that their lives are basically destroyed because they didn't have that release mechanism. They didn't have the support mechanism. And after however many years or decades, unfortunately, the dark side of our industry had its claws in them too deep.
Yeah, even from my side, being very kind of new into this, I'm really I'm very fortunate that I'm coming in, I think where I'm coming in now, and happy to see that there is such a focus and a acceptance of mental health and the idea of stress and post-traumatic stress. And it was an integral part of the EMS training, like of EMT school. An entire chapter is devoted to the health and the well-being of the EMT, and how important it is to talk to people and to have that release of that kind of burden that we take on, because like you said, we see the worst. It's everyone's worst day when we see them. And it's, granted, some of that is on our shoulders to say, okay, part of our job is making that day less worse for everybody. But it means that we take some of that on, like we put that on our shoulders, and we have to carry it. And sometimes it's really hard to put that down. And like I've had a lifetime of experiences coming in this as an adult learner, right? As somebody in my 40s, that I've been able to like be pretty healthy. But I'll be honest, like there are things that I'm scared to see. Like I haven't seen crazy traumas yet, and I haven't seen like the abuse cases and all these things, but like that's what we do. Like that's the professional side of it, is like we're going to go and do it anyway, because they need someone there and it's for them. Right. So in that journey, and I'm curious to see cause what year did you get into EMS? Like when you were 15?
Well, I took my first Red Cross first aid course in 1973, and then became a Wyoming certified EMT in 1975.
So 1975, and not that I'm an expert on EMS history, but that's the dawning of like the kind of modern EMS system, right? Like things were in their infancy in terms of standardization and practices, with the idea of paramedics kind of coming out around the country. And that was new, right? Like, it wasn't something like, oh, this existed and it's been a career track for forever. It's like, what was it like coming in a system that was like, we didn't it didn't exist before?
Yeah. So a lot of it, and that's very true. It was new. I mean, and this is where, you can't put a nail and hang something on the wall and say, what it is. Like right now, a big thing, and I have the utmost respect for them. I wish I'd have known about them sooner type of thing. But, the whole Freedom House paramedic service out of Philadelphia.
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I'm from Pennsylvania. Yeah. People would nail me to the wall if I did not go like, hey, that's a Pittsburgh. Yeah.
You need to correct that guy.
Oh yeah.
He's a wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, just the fact that you look at the other aspects, like with Freedom House, the racial hostilities that our country had, not just, there. And so you look at that now, one of the big hallmarks is the 1965 white paper on EMS that came out, which, it was the death and disability of highway traffic injuries and fatalities. They really didn't talk about the medical side, but that got things started. And that got a whole lot of money from the federal government saying, we're going to put out these 402 grants to every state to get communications, to build their system, to buy ambulances, lots and lots of things for lots of years. But it was still, in essence, and it was a bunch of renegades that it's like, what? I'm an adrenaline junkie. Okay, this looks like a good thing to do. That was a piece of it. It also, you had to look at as we had, and it, primarily male. It's still a male dominated, but I think we're closer to a 50-50 male female.
Yeah.
Definitely closer than we were in the 60s and 70s. But, you have a lot of medically trained individuals, either from the battlefields of Korea and Vietnam, or the support, the U.S. Public Health Service, that all of those things. And they're finishing with their military civil service type of commitments. And it's like, look, I just spent the last year to 20 years as a medic in XYZ, I need a civilian job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one, there wasn't a lot of civilian jobs, but this industry was growing. And so, was not easy. Wasn't just a simple, gee, get out of the military, jump into civilian EMS and life is good. But, we had a lot of expertise that as a society, we didn't know what to do with.
Yeah.
And then you had the renegade program. So and again, very biased, I'll admit it up front. You had the Mike Copuses up in Seattle. For me, it was Jerry Gordon in Denver. You had a number of others around the country, Maddox down in Houston and stuff, that pretty much all of them swore they had the very first paramedic system.
Sure, yeah.
But nobody really documented it because part of it was, we're not sure these guys should be doing this. This might be malpractice. This might be practicing medicine without a license. This, so there was a little bit of, we know what we're doing is right as the medical directors in the system, but at the same time, the trauma systems were being developed. We did not have an organized trauma system. Again, fortunately for me, I trained in Denver. Flight for Life was the first aircraft-based pre-hospital civilian air ambulance. A lot of controversy between St. Anthony's Flight for Life and Memorial Hermann's Life Flight. Several of the key people undercut several of the other key people and opened up the helicopter service. And honestly, I don't remember if it was days or weeks before the other one was supposed to, So it's like, who was the first helicopter? Well, it was Flight for Life, but Memorial Hermann had put and Red Duke was the doc there, Henry Cleveland and Peter Rosen in Denver, had put massive amounts of time and energy and thought process into what this meant. So you just keep evolving. And a lot of it was people say, well, gee, Bob, you got to do this, you got to do that. Again, one of the things that comes up commonly is, but you guys used to be able to inject epinephrine straight into the heart, into the left ventricle in a cardiac arrest. Yeah, we did. And we could do pericardial centesis. And then somebody starts studying it. Mm-hmm. And that was, you've seen the reruns or the, whatever, but, the show Emergency brought more people. That was the single greatest marketing event in EMS, the created EMS.
Yeah.
But you look at it, they did the same thing every time. IVO2, they had a syringe, a vacuum jet or a jet and a tube, and they popped the tops, put them together, And I'll tell you, there was nothing like getting that sense of being a celebrity when you did that and you had a 4.5-inch long needle and you stuck that into somebody's chest, until somebody did some research and found out pre-hospital and in the emergency department, there's a very significant opportunity to lacerate one of the vessels that supplies blood to the heart. And so you've given them epi. That heart's going to beat like crazy, but you just confirmed they're going to die because you lacerated an artery inside the heart. So I shouldn't do that anymore. You know? And so we tried a lot of things. We did a lot of things. Some of it has been time tested. Some of it, the research was bogus, and we've taken products off the market. Now they're starting to be looked at again with a less biased research. But it was all new. And the issue of ALS versus BLS. And to the best of my knowledge, and I try to stay up on this particular topic, is there is no legitimate peer-reviewed published research paper in the world that says paramedics save more lives than basics. And it comes down to that, old wives' tales, what grandma taught me, what grandpa taught me of, if you do the basics really well, you're doing really well. Yeah. Now, we as paramedics, as advanced providers of all the different levels, help, but was it really what we did, or was it really what you as a new EMT, knowing your foundation's solid, what's the patient outcome?
Right.
I mean, just go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You could get me going on the idea of the difference between BLS and ALS for all day, because as somebody who is like I'm a lifetime learner. I love acquiring new skills and things, but I've also gained a healthy respect and a true admiration of those that it gives you something to move towards, like the idea of an advanced provider having additional skill sets, additional knowledge, and like the fact that they've committed to that as a career. Is something that also, like, because like EMTs, while yes, it is a profession, it is a professional approach to a skill set. However, I will be the first to admit that like it is attainable for most people, and a lot of volunteers and people that do it as non quote unquote professional, as like this is my whole career doing this, can achieve doing it, which is what allowed me to do it. Right. But at the same time, I'm like, I want to learn how to give IVs, and I want to learn how to intubate and all the different things. I'd love to be able to add on to things, which or acquire new skills and have a basic skill set and not have this huge hurdle of like going through this giant program that is like a defined ALS skill set. Right. And I'm curious, was it always like that? Like, so when back in like the 70s and 80s, was that clear? Like, oh, you have to go to school to become a paramedic, or was it more of a gradual transition back then?
No, it's most of it was you had to go to school to be a paramedic. Mm-hmm. A lot of the folks coming out of the military, although they had super advanced training, a lot of clinical experience, a lot of patient time. You look at it, they were military, so they were very good at penetrating trauma, bullets or bombs, broken bones. Yeah. They had no training on pediatrics, geriatrics, OBGYN, and most of their patient population was 16 to 30, so it's like
male only.
Yeah. A 25-year-old can have a heart attack, not that common. Right. It can happen. I'm standing in front of this guy with a lot of brass on his shoulders. He's pale diaphoretic and turning blue. I didn't have geriatric medicine, you know. And so there were those challenges. And it also just, out of fairness with some of this, the lack of research that shows paramedics are doing good, part of that is societal versus structural, in that even in the 80s, you looked at especially the Nordic countries, their standard for a cardiac arrest save, core save, whatever you want to call it, was the patient was reanimated 14 days after the event, which meant the patient had vital signs compatible with life 14 days after CPR was done in the pre-hospital setting.
Wow.
In this country, in those early years, it's if I could get the patient across the door, the threshold into the emergency department with some sign of life, it was a save, pre-hospital save.
Right.
And it's not my fault that the nurses and doctors killed my patient.
Right.
And so what is a resuscitation? What is outcome? Right. And that's where we're hugely lacking. So for me as an advanced provider, the evidence base says I've never saved more people than if I'd have just stayed in EMT basic.
Sure.
But yeah, I got to do a lot of cool procedures. But the other part of it was our focus has not been on outcome.
Yeah.
And it's not quality of life, but is that patient reanimated? Did I prevent something, the patient from, and here too, we measure a lot of life and death. Well, what about the patient not getting sicker?
Right.
Okay. today with the pre-hospital field blood program. Massive excitement over that.
Yeah.
One, because it's working, but it's also the patients are not getting to that almost point of zero return.
Right.
Okay. They're in uncompensated shock and you cannot get them back. We're changing that. And I think this is going to be one of those early step things of certain things that we do, advanced things that we do. It is in 5 years, 10 years, however long, it's going to show, paramedics did save a lot of lives, but it was because we're measuring the outcome.
Yeah.
Where, the old tongue-in-cheek, you take a dead body to the best surgeon in the country, he's going to have a fatality.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't kill him twice.
Yep.
So we probably have not been measuring what the answer to the question we're asking.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. People have said numerous times, and they probably, some of your friends and stuff say, well, Mike, have you saved anybody yet? Have you ripped them from the jaws of death? And whether you have or not. Yeah. But I can tell you in multi decades of work, I can only think of a handful, maybe 3, maybe 6. Maybe there's some more if I really sat down and thought about it, of people that I truly ripped from the jaws of death and I saved them. Most of them, people are going to get better or worse. We just try to make it proper care and comfortable.
Yeah.
Because we're not looking at that outcome question.
Well, I like the way you put it in terms of, everyone thinks of this profession as like, okay, they're getting so far down the track and then we grip them from the jaws of death and pull them back, from the goal line all the way back to the 50-yard line or something like that. When in reality, I mean, if you're going to use a sports metaphor, if you'll allow me,
Sure.
Our job is good defense. Like our job is to make sure that they're not progressing down that field at all. Like as we're giving every effort that we can so that they are not, making a yard at a time.
Right.
And it's, when people look at that, they go, oh, that was a boring game. Like, they're like, oh, that was a defensive game. They want to see they want the dramatic turnovers and changes of possession, if you will. Like, oh, no, death has them now. Oh no, now the EMTs have the ball back and they're running back. But it's really more of that kind of defensive game where it's conservative. We're looking at behaviors and tactics and skills that you could do anything. You could, theoretically, somebody can be taught to open up a chest and do like a clamshell thoracotomy in the field.
Right.
But why? Like, is there, like, you need to be able to back that up and say, does it lead to good outcomes?
Right.
And, over time, over many instances, it can't just be the willy-nilly like, oh, well, we're going to try this and see if it works out, because some people have, and you can look at it and go, listen, okay, they tried it once, they tried it a couple times, it's not working. So don't do that. Instead, give them some oxygen and get them to the hospital where they could do that in like the more clinical environment. Like it's just, it's, you really have to look at the results, right?
Right. And I think that's that was a great analogy of, because it's you do that clamshell or you do open massage in a chest and then take them to a hospital that may not even have a surgeon, let alone a thoracic surgeon or a cardiovascular surgeon. It's like, come on, folks, this is a team sport that goes from the very first alert to alarm all the way through the entire hospital building to the patient going home. And you break that chain somewhere and it doesn't go good. And as you were saying that, the two things that come to mind is one is paramedic. You and I are working on an ambulance and you said you've not had that critical trauma where we have a critical trauma. You're my EMT. I'm doing all my paramedic stuff. And then all of a sudden you tap me on the shoulder and it's like, Bob, would you like oxygen on this patient?
Right.
And what's my response in the standard system? Oh my God, Mike, I thought you did that like 5 minutes ago.
Right.
But you're like, no, Bob, you've told me. When I tell you to do something, you do it.
Right.
Don't touch my patient. So we have to, one, get into that teamwork, but those basics. And then as you were talking too, I mean, I can vividly remember had a young man overdose, cardiac arrest, and I'm a brand new paramedic, and I, got all these skills and techniques and equipment, and I can do all this stuff. And I'm working with a paramedic who happened to be a Denver General. Now it's called Denver Health and Hospitals, but Denver General paramedic. And they really were probably the best in the country. Seattle was very good in cardiac arrest.
Mm-hmm.
Denver was good across all pre-hospital medicine. And this particular gentleman was what we called an alpha or a beta paramedic. So when Denver started their program, it was very willy-nilly, if you will, but they spent 2 years in the emergency department working with these new docs that now we call, traumatologists and emergency medicine specialists. So I'm working with this paramedic who's highly experienced, and I'm bouncing all over the patient and I'm doing this stuff. And he finally just kind of smacks me in the head and says, Bob, cardiac arrest is like making bread. You put something in, you mix it up, give it a little time, put something else in, mix it up. You're just making bread. And I can still remember how devastating that was, because he ruined my entire adrenaline rush.
Oh yeah.
Because he was right, and I did have a lot better success rates after he brought me back to reality instead of this, you have such an adrenaline rush. You're chasing shiny things and your foot just ripped out the IV because, you're an idiot. So it's that methodical, what do we do? We're a team, which is part of a bigger team, which is part of a bigger team. And oh, by the way, the patient.
Yeah.
Don't forget the patient.
Yeah, they're at the center of all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So
my question for you, Bob, being that you've seen all these kind of years of change, and we've talked obviously wild procedures, the cardiocentesis and the things that used to do in the field, but we've now, looked at the evidence, kind of scaled that back, say it just doesn't prove to be done in the field.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything from, I'll call it old school EMS, the kind of, back in the day type stuff that we've lost that you can point to? It doesn't have to be a procedure or something or a tool, but something about EMS in its infancy that we don't have anymore that would be beneficial for us to kind of embrace. Right.
Yeah, I think there is. I think there's both some on the philosophical, social side, and then some on the procedural side. From the philosophical, and again, I'm very biased because, like all of us, this is the house I grew up in.
Yep. And,
your house maybe was bigger or smaller, but it was a different house.
Yeah.
It wasn't my house.
Smells different.
So one of the things when I started at what became Thompson Valley, at the time, although we were a private ambulance and then it was hospital owned and then it became a hospital district or an ambulance district, we worked in the emergency room 8 of every 24-hour shifts unless we were on a call. Well, with that, there were times where the emergency department wasn't busy. And so we were allowed to go anywhere else in the house. Mm-hmm. And, as long as they wanted to. Now, one of the things that I believed we had an impact on, but I can't prove it, I can't validate it, can't document it, is in those early years, you have a critical patient, you send them over to radiology, be it for x-rays or a CT scan, and then all of a sudden the alarms would go off and the patient has crashed in x-ray, in radiology, and we'd all go running over there. Well, today, pretty much any hospital of size, if they're more than 25 bed, 50 bed, I don't know that there's a magic number, but somewhere When you send a patient to radiology, they either have critical care nurses or some of them hire paramedics in their department, or somebody from the emergency department or ICU, CCU goes with them. You don't just send this patient off with a radiology tech who resuscitation is not what they were trained to do.
Right.
Yeah, they know CPR, but that's it. So I think that's one example of a good change. We've become better team players.
Sure.
Than we were. The thing that is disappointing to me is so much of what we've changed is based on cash, and in several of the standard establishers, the people that set our standards, we're using medications or not using medications, and it's not based on sound science. And I'll give you one example. There's a drug called beryllium, okay? And it's a multi-use type. It has more than just a single use. But when we were doing a cardiac arrest, beryllium was the second to the bottom drug given. You only gave one below it and then, stopped resuscitation. And yet the science has always said, the manufacturer has always said, that medication takes 30 to 45 minutes to take effect. Well, if you're giving it in the last 3 to 5 minutes and then stopping, of course it's not going to work.
Yeah.
There's other drugs that they use in like the ICU setting all the time. They say, oh, well, that must be good for ICU, so it must be good for EMS. And yet we don't give the drug the same. And like pretty much every medication, especially IV medications, there are some very specific ways to administer it. Time is an issue. Dose or concentration is an issue. And when you start saying, well, look, I'm only with my patient for 15 minutes. I don't have 45. Well, you can't change solid science to something else and call it solid science. It's
right.
Like, no, the everyday person. If you don't believe this, next time you go to the gas station, fill your standard gas car with diesel fuel. Diesel fuel runs a lot of vehicles down the highway, millions and millions of miles. But guess what? You put the wrong fuel in the wrong engine, you just created your own problems. And that's so we have to keep those things in mind. I think procedurally, a number of procedures that we tried in the 70s and 80s and even the 90s, you do now. The majority are because they didn't work the way we wanted them to. Some of them did. Like I say, there's certain things that are starting to come back and be reviewed. And it's like, is this good patient care or not good patient care? And I give you an example of something that's very new that in my opinion, we have to change. So just about a year ago, one of the probably the biggest EMS social media influencer, put out a thing that said, are we using tourniquets too often? And it was focused primarily at law enforcement. And, it's like, wait a minute, we just spent the last 10 years getting people to do something and stop the bleeding.
Right.
And now you're saying, don't do that. Well, again, and this particular person is besides being very smart and thinks way too much, he likes to throw questions out there to stir the pot and let people think, instead of saying, Dr. So-and-so says you must do this. It's, hey, think about this, think about the negative, think about the positive and everything in between. And so, I sent him a message and others said, you don't want, we'll just pick on the cops. You don't want a cop not to put a tourniquet on someone and then that someone die because they needed it.
Right.
But part of this question, and I just listened to a presentation from a trauma surgeon last week about that. And in the last 18 months, he's had 2 patients that had tourniquets on their thighs. And by the time they got to him in the level 1 trauma center, they had to amputate both of these patients' legs. And in the process, they found there was no arterial bleed to begin with.
Oh.
Both of these patients had tourniquets on for greater than 4 hours, and the tourniquet was placed in the pre-hospital setting.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter whether it was a cop, an EMT, paramedic. They went to a hospital and were seen by physicians or mid-level providers, the nurse practitioners, PAs, all those. The tourniquet was left on. It was never evaluated.
Mm-hmm.
And 4 hours after application or greater, one of them was several hours beyond that, they finally made it to a trauma center, and by then it was too late.
Yeah.
So, I think the issue for me is not, are we putting on too many tourniquets?
Yeah.
I think, especially a cop, if you're in the heat of a battle or the post-battle, post-gunshot, gunfight, knife fight, traffic accident, whatever it is,
yep,
you've got other things to do. It's just like with me. In our system at Thompson Valley, when we called in with a big trauma, our kind of code phrase was, I got a 32-year-old motorcycle crash, head, chest, and pelvic injuries. I'm doing a bunch of paramedic stuff. I'll be there in 15 minutes.
Uh-huh.
And that was the code to activate the full trauma system.
Yep.
Get the surgeons there, get all the allied, everything ready. So when we hit the door, and we were a level 3, maybe pushing level 2, but really a level 3 trauma center. So we didn't have all the resources the big places, the big house had, but it was a teamwork.
Yeah.
And they didn't say, okay, Bob, what size angiocath did you put in which spot on the hand or the arm? And, they knew we're busy. And we're going to make you very busy very quickly. So we start working through those things so those are the type things that we have to look at. We have to look at with that tourniquet of let the cop, let the bystander put the tourniquet on whenever they think it's appropriate, whether there's a lot of blood or they've got a lot of other things to do.
Yeah.
And yet then for us, whether it's an EMT, whether it's a paramedic, I need to consider converting that to something other than the tourniquet. Can I do that? Can I do that without causing detriment to the patient? When we get that patient to the emergency department, the ED needs to look at, or the consideration of conversion.
Yeah.
We don't have a surgeon here. We don't have a vascular surgeon here, but can I convert this?
Right.
Should it be converted? And again, it was a very thought-provoking to see the pictures of 2 humans, tourniquets on their legs, and you could tell the leg was basically dead.
Yeah. I mean,
because
it's this.
Nobody considered conversion.
Right. It's the same thing as saying like, okay, well, we don't want people using fire extinguishers because it's too big of a mess to clean up afterwards, like the powder chemicals. And it's one of those like, well, I totally like the thing that keeps coming to my head. And to your point before about like, things that influence the industry now in terms of like money's a big influencer and whether things get reimbursed and cost and insurance. But also like the idea of not my problem. Like nobody, like some people don't want to jump into something where it's like, well, I don't want to be responsible for that because if I do, then I'm liable or something, that kind of like that atmosphere that exists nowadays of like, well, I can't go beyond whatever it is that I'm taught or that is very narrowly aligned for what I've been told that I can do, because then I can be held liable for trying to do good, even though Like, and that's, there has to be a contingency for the tourniquet, because like, the fact is, okay, yeah, there are going to be mistakes that happen with people putting tourniquets on. No matter what, like if tourniquets exist, there is going to be a mistake. There needs to be a procedure for assessing whether or not it has been mistakenly placed. And that needs to happen somewhere along that paradigm, hopefully sooner. Like, like the either field assessment of a conversion, or like that needs to be one of those things that's like happening as soon as they come into the hospital, which to me would make most sense because they have all the things there in an environment where it's like, okay, let's check this thing to see if it's actually, needed. Oh, well, let's put another one back on. We've got 15 shelves of tourniquets and all the different hemostats and things that we can do to address it if we need to. But somebody needs to be looking at that going, well, do we just tell people to not put tourniquets on, or do we add something into this procedure? And actually, I really like that question, like posed publicly, but it's so rough because, and like me being a layman and kind of involved in like firearms training the last 10 years, seeing the proliferation and the acceptance of tourniquets. Because when I was a kid, like I remember I was in the Scouts, and like tourniquets were verboten. Like they told you what a tourniquet is just so that you would know not to use one. And
well, I mean, and you talk about differences. So in that very, very first aid class, all the way through and even into paramedic school, we were taught if you put a tourniquet on, they will lose the extremity.
Yeah.
Or it was life or limb.
Right.
You use a tourniquet to save their life, but you will sacrifice a limb. Now, with a lot of especially the Army's Institute of Surgical Research unit that studies they study all the injuries and all the, but from Afghanistan and Iraq, that 20-year war, they got a lot. And what they showed within their population is that, in essence, nobody lost the extremity due to the tourniquet use. If it was a top shelf quality tourniquet, they lost the extremity due to the injuries. Now, there are those variables, especially like with the special forces folks, where they can't get that patient to a hospital or a medical unit in 30 minutes. They may be with them because they're way out there, they're pinned down, whatever it may be. So this patient, they're going to take care of them for hours or even a couple days.
Yeah.
But they don't just leave the tourniquet on and never recheck it. And, as with all the other injuries or illnesses. So, we've got good data out there to say, let's do something different, which is not use a tourniquet. It's let's look at the steps between application and surgeon or surgical need. There's just a lot we can do for better patient outcome in that gap between those two questions or two timestamps.
Exactly. I think that's and those are the fun parts of the EMS world, where we get to, even from my point being new, getting to see the discussion on things and how things change. And I think that's fascinating. And it's all, and the really kind of wholesome part about it is it's all, at the end of the day, for the most part, rooted in what is best for the patient. Like that is, and it's our North Star, right? And it's nice to be in an industry and a job where it's like, hey, no, I have a 100% well-defined North Star that I need to navigate towards, and that is good patient care.
Right.
But I have a question for you, because I know we've been chatting about the, your journey as a provider, the things that make EMS interesting. But one of the reasons, and just to kind of bring this thing home, and why I thought it'd be great to bring Bob into here, is because you've transitioned from being a provider, where you obviously had a storied career and a ton of experience and things that formed how you think about medicine, and transitioned that into a second career, if you will, or maybe it's your third, however many careers you've had. People have many nowadays, right? Yeah. But you found a new home in not only a corporate world, but in a company that I've heard you talk about several times now is somewhere that you just, it's all about the people and like knowing who works there and like, being well, very, very like blessed to be in that space. Right. So for the provider who is riding the truck, the ones that are like, oh, man, I don't know if I can do this forever, or that just want to take that and go to the next thing and kind of find another challenge for themselves. What options exist for somebody out there that wants to kind of transition into maybe a different industry or the same industry, but a different aspect of it?
Yeah, I think, part of it is, and I don't know who coined the adage or where it really came from, but there's an old adage that says, he who shows up makes the decisions. And I think that's a key to it. I'll twist it a little bit and say, she who shows up participates in the decision. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the big things. So even if you're staying in direct patient care, or you want to go into, education or administration or bureaucracy or sales or, whatever it may be, is one, I think you need to show up. To do good patient care, you have to show up mentally and physically. And so for a lot of people, I think that's the best single piece of advice I can give. Because here too, there's too many people that have a title after their name. And we joke about it, but it's unfortunately highly true of Bob didn't show up at the company meeting last night. We need a new training officer. Bob. Yeah. Okay, Bob's our new training officer. Well, why? Well, he's a great paramedic. He's a good paramedic. But is he a good educator?
Right.
Or is he the good shift supervisor? So you need to explore it a bit before you just jump in. Mm-hmm. I've met, and I've done it myself a time or two, but far too many people that it's like, man, this looks like, the ultimate thing I want to do. And I'm going to leave behind what I know, what I'm good at, what I'm probably comfortable in. And I jump to this other opportunity only to realize I did not know what I did not know. Mm-hmm. And I'm either from miserable to, gosh, and I'll tell you, like my time at Thompson Valley, there are days now, these several decades later, that I'm like, why did I ever leave there?
Yeah.
Great place to work, great people, great pay and benefits. All those things. But I also know that have been very honored and blessed in my EMS adventures over the decades. So that's one thing. I think explore. Don't jump into something because, hey, my buddy Mike said you should get into marketing. It's great and I did really well. And, you have freedoms or protocols, whatever it is. Well, explore it a bit first.
Yeah. Put in the time.
Yeah. And I think that's true of don't lock yourself in. The one phrase that I absolutely despise within this industry is when people come up to me or I come up to them and they say, well, I'm just an EMT. And I correct them right off the bat going, well, if you're just an EMT, you should probably get out of the field.
Yeah.
Because you're just not going to make it or not going to help people. And they're like, but I'm a basic. It's like, you're the foundation. You're what the rest of us stand on. And so take pride in that. Make sure that you're the best EMT. Mm-hmm. You're very good EMT. You're not a just.
Yeah.
So I think that's critical. And then follow your passions. Like pediatrics, I spent a lot of my career involved in pediatrics and neonatology. And it all started because, and I still remember that very first SIDS baby I had as a paramedic, kids scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
And I just made the conscious decision, you either need to learn more so you're more comfortable or do something else.
Yeah.
And I went with, let's just keep learning. So look at those things. You've said it several times, as we've talked previously and today, of being a lifelong learner may not be your standard or your genetic calling, if you will. Well, you may have to force yourself. Mm-hmm. But if you learn to a point and stop, you're just an EMT.
Yeah.
So do that lifelong learning. Like say, I've done, give or take, pretty much everything within the pre-hospital setting, except being a flight medic, which was one of the things I've always wanted to do. And I was just too much of a coward to take the jump because I'd have to move. And yet I've moved, numerous times. I don't know why. Always wanted to be a flight medic, and I did not make that happen. Mm-hmm. But things, clinically, in hospital, out of hospital, there's so many opportunities now. The allied fields, people say, as a paramedic, we don't get paid that well. Nurses get paid twice as much and stuff. Part of that's true. It's like, if you want to be a nurse, if you want to go in there and getting your RN, especially a BSN, that opens the world multiple times more than it does as an EMT or paramedic. Mm-hmm. You look at now, which we didn't have or weren't aware of, if you will, back in the early years, but now there is a much, much higher percentage of physicians, emergency physicians, medical directors that were EMTs and were paramedics, and many of them still are. They maintain their paramedic license, or their EMT license. So, like that first EMT class I was in, it was taught mostly by nurses. Mm-hmm. We had a doc or two come in now and then. None of the nurses had worked in the emergency department, because part of it is a lot of places really, unless you were a big academic center, you didn't have a true emergency department. It's just everybody called it that, but they was like, okay, you're going to work emergency department today, surgery tomorrow, med surge Thursday. Mm-hmm. You're a nurse. We can put you anywhere in the house we want you. So we were taught initially by non-pre-hospital providers.
Yeah.
And today it is uncommon that a significant portion of your EMT program and even more of the paramedic program is taught by experienced pre-hospital providers, even if they have different initials after their name now.
Yeah.
But we're seeing that PAs, nurse practitioners, the advanced practice folks, the physicians. I have friends that are perfusionists.
Yep.
And it's like, you talk about somebody that makes incredible amounts of money, and they typically work for one cardiovascular surgeon, and their sole purpose in life is to keep this patient viable. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you're sitting at a table watching machines, and they're like, yeah, but the responsibilities and the outcomes, the rewards, go from EMT or paramedic to nurse anesthetist.
Right.
It's just wide open.
Yeah.
And even, you mentioned with your firearms experience. I have a colleague who's a former Green Beret medic, went to work for one of the major weapons manufacturers as an instructor.
Yep.
And yet maintained his paramedic, and now, he's working with Sam Medical. So he's crossed multiple lines, but you start looking at, it's like, these are all connected, because you had to have safety and medical planning on the firing range.
Yep.
They're not really separate entities until something bad happens. Though often you're preventing the bad from happening. Right. So again, I think my bottom line to somebody that's looking for whatever reason, done this long enough, I'm burned out, I want to learn more, is show up, participate, and then decide what's good for you.
I like it. Yeah. The, like, as you were talking, the thing that really came into my head was that, like, all of these things center around like core skills, right? Like yourself in like, okay, in EMS, you experienced, mentorship and teaching. And then that's kind of, gave you a skill set of being, a training manager. Somebody might have the ability to experience the skill set of leading, and that leads them into leadership roles and other things. I think it really all comes around to that core competency, though, of being in EMS. And that is kind of that grace under fire type thing where it's like you have the ability to practice like really game changing and life changing decision making in a quick and high stakes environment where you get a lot of practice doing that. And when you embrace that and can pull that into a bunch of other things, man, I like that alone is something that can be leveraged into so much stuff.
It can. And let me interject there. To me, one of those high value skills that we mostly overlook is, holding the little old person or the scared child's hand.
Yes.
And you're really not doing any, especially invasive medicine.
Yep.
But it's that compassion and care.
Yep.
It's finally coming out, well known, instead of being the dark little paramedic secret of, we have this patient who's having a stroke or heart attack, infarct. Well, let's drive stupid with lights and sirens.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're hearing those sirens and they're being jostled around. What is that doing to their blood pressure?
Mm-hmm.
What is that doing to their respiratory rate? What is that doing to their mentation? And, one of the last things you want on a patient who is actively stroking or actively infarcting is to raise their adrenaline, raise their anxiety, raise their blood pressure, raise their heartbeat. And it's like, you know what? It's going to take us 2 minutes longer to get to the hospital, but it's a nice, sane, and safe trip.
Yep.
And I can do my paramedic stuff, but I can also hold the patient's hand and reassure them.
Yeah. That can
and
mean
I think we miss
everything.
Some of that. I'm ripping them from the jaws of death again. It's like, no, you're pushing them. The Grim Reaper is like, yeah, go, Bob, run, siren.
Yeah. Because then he's like, oh, I might get the three of you in the ambulance all together.
Right.
Like, yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think this is and not to cut things off because I know you and I can chat all day. And my hope is that you'll be willing to come back on the podcast again because we love having you, and it's been such an amazing experience kind of getting to learn from you, and it's just it's so much fun. It's so much fun to hear the perspective of somebody in the industry, but working for an amazing company like Sam Medical, who's been so supportive of the EMS space and us as a podcast and trying to like encourage people to be a part of this thing. I think that would just be so much fun to kind of keep that conversation going. My question for you, my like the final kind of wrap up here, which I think is important to us and the people that we hope are our audience, right? The new providers, the people that are interested in maybe coming in. Like how I would phrase this, Bob, is if you could go back in time and talk to young Bob, the medical explorer who's just kind of getting into this stuff, who is excited about it, who's curious about what's coming next and where his life goes with EMS and the possibilities. What do you say to him? What's your advice for the young EMT getting into, or the new EMT, I should say, getting into EMS at the start?
Yeah, I think so that's a tough question.
Because your answer for Bob would probably be different than the other people. You
hear these things of, write yourself a letter to your 18-year-old self or whatever. I think part of it is establish a focus, whether that's called goals or objectives, but, establish a focus and work really hard to be as good as you can be, instead of hoping that if I take a bunch of extra training where I, work for this agency or that agency. They'll make me good. So one, that focus. I think the other thing, in all honesty, if I had it truly to do all over again, it would be don't chase the shiny thing, stay focused, and work harder to get into medical school and be a physician. Now, for me, I've had those years where I was not a nice person. If you weren't really sick or really traumatized, you didn't need me, and I let you know that. I've gotten past that, hopefully. I'm a better person now. But, I think it's if you're going to stay in patient care, whatever that looks like, you must maintain your compassion. And I think, it's Bob, don't go after the resume building, the titles. What's the compassion for the human first, and then the compassion for you? What do you do? I think the other thing I would tell myself is don't sacrifice your family to be the big dog, or and I went through that too. Fortunately, my wife, is we haven't got the thing from Pope Leo yet, but I think she's on the list to be canonized.
She's performed several miracles and she's ready for sainthood.
But EMS, we have one of the highest suicide rates. We have one of the highest chemical dependency, chemical use rates. We have one of the highest divorce rates. We have one of the highest physical abuse, self or other rates. And so part of that is be protective, which means let go.
Yeah.
Find out how to vent. Find out, the whole PTSD or CT, critical incident stress debriefing, CISD, whatever the term of the week is, but that mental health, think about that. But if you want to do this as a profession, like any profession, be that lifelong learner, be good at what you do. And when you find that you're better at something, maybe gravitate that way. When you find you're less good at it or your passion just isn't there, gravitate away from it, so that you're participating. You showed up and you're participating, and then have some checkpoints, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. How did you do? And I think having those checkpoints to look back, I didn't look back soon enough to say, you know what? You're actually doing pretty dang good. You may be a jerk this time frame. You may be compassionate this time frame, but you're doing pretty good,
Yeah.
So don't, I don't know. I mean, and knowing a little bit about you, we've all met people who they're in 10, 20, 30 plus years into their career. They've hated it since the beginning, but it's like the job I got out of high school or the job I got out of college. Never liked it, but I didn't have the guts. It's like me as a flight medic.
Yeah.
There is no reason on this earth or divine that I was not a flight medic other than I made the decision not to be.
Yeah, exactly.
I told myself and everybody else, this is what I want,
Yeah.
So I think that's the big thing.
I love it. Yeah, I will most certainly keep some of those things true to myself. I don't know if I'll be in this for 50 years, but I will certainly, I think it's amazing advice to kind of take stock, right? Like to see just how far you've come, appreciate the effort you put into it, and recognize that you have made progress. You are doing amazing things. I've been so kind of like focused on like, I just need to get into this. I need to do this thing. I need to be like, right now I'm in this kind of like phase where I've gotten through school. I need to be a recognized primary provider, but like, and after that, it's like, oh, I need to become a lead or a supervisor, or like, I could see that progression being something that's people become so focused on. And at the end of the day, hey, do you like enjoy what we're doing? Find the thing that you really, you resonate with in this thing, and find that, and then just, go whole hog on it. Like,
Right.
I think that's, we all need to find the thing that about this world or this profession, this, anything that you find that it's like, it's okay to find things that bring you joy and to, that bring you satisfaction. And it's really important. And those are the motivators that keep us going.
Right. Yeah. And as you were saying that, Mike, one of the things that came out is everybody has to pay their dues, pay their sacrifices and stuff, and so like as on the ambulance, it's not all about critical patients. It's not trauma and heart attacks, strokes. It's probably 90+% are transfers, interfacility transfers, people that, could have driven themselves or taken a some type of lift.
Yeah, it's Uber. Uber would have been a great choice.
Yeah,
way cheaper.
But you look at that, and it's, if you're not, you have to get that foundation. Yeah. Like I say, I was just very blessed that we did a lot of interfacility transfers, but we're also busy with trauma and medicine. So you got to know that compassion, and working in the emergency department, you got to learn that compassion. But it's also, there's a lot of, like every industry, there's a lot of really crappy players within the industry. And so, as a new EMT, especially getting hired by the first company that will hire you might be a great experience. Or it may be, man, these people, their ethics, their values, I can't match up with that.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid, get a little experience and move on.
Oh yeah.
Find that group that is good for you, that you are also a good fit for. And sometimes it's work.
Yep.
Because of geography and family, and I don't want to be driving 2 or 3 hours one way to work. But there's a lot of really, really good groups out there. Ambulance services, agencies, fire departments, nursing homes, hospitals. If you want to be good, you have to surround yourself with good folks.
Yes.
Also, you need to be in that. So think about that. Don't limit yourself with, XYZ is the only one that'll hire me, and they have a 80% turnover, and they crappy ambulances and poor. You just, if you're that miserable before you get the job, it's not going to change just because you showed up.
Right.
Think about those things. Think about your quality of knowledge and what you have to offer. So, and I would like to say one last thing, and it's
please.
That, in one respect, that shameless promotion.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
So, Sam Medical is an outstanding company to work for. From its founders, Sam and Sherry, who retired just about 2 years ago from this company, doesn't mean they've slowed down at all. But just wonderful people. And, 2 years ago, May, we were acquired by a group called Tritech Forensics, who owns a couple of, we now have several sister companies or brother companies. And that's when EMS is a business. Ask about changes. In the 70s, there were very few corporate ambulance services. Most of there were the hospital based, the county owned, that type thing. And then corporate America realized there's money in this with this group of renegades. Yeah. And so TTF bought us, has made some very positive changes. And I think they, even though they come from the forensics, the CSI type stuff,
right?
A different aspect of a kind of a sister occupation or industry, they are helping to promote that. And you don't hear that all the time with a lot of these acquisitions. It's just, this is the Wall Street raiders that come in and decimate the ambulance service.
Hostile takeovers.
Yeah. So it's, it is very nice where I'm at now in life, in my career, to be working with a brand a company that is so strong as Sam Medical, and we've got a company and some investors in TTF that are promoting good quality patient care. And yes, it's for profit. They want their money back,
It's America. We should do things for profit.
Yeah. So think about that. When you're looking for a job, when you're looking for equipment. I did a big training last night with a group, a virtual training, and specific to the Sam Splint. And one of the people in the front row had a knockoff.
Oh.
And, so from 1,000 miles away, it's like, I thought you guys all bought Sam Splints. And he's like, oh, this is my personal one. You got a screaming deal on it. It's like, I bet we did.
I saved $4. I mean, come on.
Yeah. So anyway, Mike, I'm very honored. Yes, I will absolutely, anytime you throw the invitation out there or,
awesome.
For you or your listeners, your participants, if they have questions, get a hold of me.
Awesome.
This is what I do. It's what I want to do. And, to get to know you better as a friend and as a professional podcaster has really been an honor. And so, yes, anytime.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And like I said, having you be a mentor to us has meant everything. So if people want to get a hold of Bob, how can they do it?
So the two easy ways, my email address is bob.waddell, and I see the spelling of my last name on the
on the screen.
So hopefully, but it's bob.waddell, WADD as in David, ELL at sammedical.com, all lowercase, or my phone. My cell phone is 307-282-0388. And I just, I do turn it off at night.
Good, because you're going to get an onslaught of people texting you saying like, "Oh my God, Bob, you're so awesome!" Well, all the listeners.
When I had my training company and I had projects in basically almost all the time zones, and it'd be like, okay, the call at 1:00 is the Germans, the call at 2:00 or 3:00 was the Japanese, and calls on Saturday was typically the Middle East. So you got used to different cultures, different time zones. So yes, I do turn it off. And my standard is if I can answer the phone, I will. Leave a message, because if you don't, you're probably spam in my mind and I will delete it. So, but either bob.waddell at sammedical.com or 307-282-0388.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Bob, and everybody else out there listening. Reach out to Bob. Let him know how awesome he is. I'm sure Sam will appreciate his inbox getting filled up from all the listeners. But no, Bob, thank you so much for joining us. This has been an absolute pleasure. Look forward to the next one. And for anybody out there listening, listen to the upcoming episodes, musculoskeletal trauma. We have other Sam Medical incorporations coming in for some of our tools of the trade. They've been a huge resource and a sponsor for us. So I can't thank them enough. And to say just how, I know this sounds like, promotion, but I really do believe that they make awesome things, and they're a company that supports education and getting good stuff out there to new providers. And I can't thank them enough for that. So find out more about Sam Medical, go talk to Bob, and keep listening. And until next time, we'll see you all on the ride along. This podcast is for educational and storytelling purposes only. It is not medical advice or official EMT training. Always follow your accredited instructors and local protocols.
Heartbeats racing.